Put your hands away from the food, Lena snapped. Don't you dare touch the food. My husband's family is coming. I stood there with a carton of strawberries, sweating on my palm, and the door of our fridge yawning open like a mouth that might finally speak up for me. The fridge was full because I had filled it. I had hustled a double shift, swapping brake pads on the Sky Whale ride, and tightened enough bolts to make my forearms feel like wire. I had carried those sacks through the rain, lined the plastic containers up with labels facing out like soldiers, and now I was the cashless house ghost standing in a kitchen that looked like it belonged to the internet. My family, I said. My mother. Exactly, she said, and the word landed like a slap. So don't smudge anything. My son, Evan, padded in, hair sticking up and socks peeling at the heel. He had learned 8-year-old diplomacy, which is to say he spoke what he heard and hoped nobody blamed him. He looked at me, then at Lena, and in the kind of voice kids use when they repeat the smartest thing they know, he said, "Honey, take the card from my mother. There's $130,000 on it." I had not known my mother had any card with a number like that. My mother, Marge, counts out quarters for the laundromat and folds the receipt like it is a birth certificate. Lena turned her face toward the living room ring light, which stood there like an extra roommate, and gave a half smile the shape of an open blade. "Isn't that nice?" she said. "Your mom finally doing something generous." "That's not her card," I said. My voice came out even. "She wouldn't." Lena tilted her head, like the comment was a gnat. "Don't be dramatic," she said, picking up her tan bag with the chain strap. "It is just a card. Evan, sweetie, grab your tablet." I watched her leave like you watch the start of a ride you know too well. If the park is church, then repetition is the liturgy. I fix rides at Harbour Light Park, which is a fancy name for a tired strip of steel and salt on our town's edge. The park smells like brine and fryer oil no matter what you do. The Sky Whale needs new seals every season because the sea eats rubber faster than land. There are catwalks nobody but guys like me should know about. There are maintenance doors that open into quiet tunnels where the public never goes. I know where they all are. At home, I know nothing. 3 hours later, I was in the card aisle at the grocery store, staring at a row of birthday cakes with cartoon blue frosting, when my phone buzzed with a picture from Lena. She had spread out dresses across a couch in a store I could not afford to sit in. She had captions bubbling in my messages, like champagne. "Finally," one said, "we are not peasants." The second came fast. "Perfume too," she wrote. "The good kind. Alyssa says you can smell the bass notes for days." I imagined bass notes and thought about machine oil. I imagined days. When I got home, the fridge had been opened 20 times, and every grape sat in a new bowl, like we had hired a stylist for fruit. Evan ate chicken nuggets and told me he had watched a man on the internet restore a rusty knife with vinegar. "People lie online," I said. "Do you?" he asked. I took a breath. I try not to. At 9 that night, Lena swept back in with a smile expensive enough to reflect. Bag swung on her arm like she was practicing a parade. I offered to help, and she sniffed. "Not those hands," she said. "You smell like work." "If I didn't, where would the salmon come from?" I said. She turned to the mirror by the door and took a selfie with the flash timed so the kitchen lights whitened her eyes. She left again, with barely a goodbye, because shopping is a sport, and she trained late. I sat with Evan and watched the little airplane in his game circle the same island and felt the old feeling, the one where you're strapped into a ride you didn't design and cannot stop. At 10:30, my phone rang again. It was Lena, and the background noise said her world was made of music and laughter and high ceilings. She did not say hello. "They had to call the manager," she said. "Some hold on the card. Silly computers." "Whose card?" I said. She hung up. At 11:15, she came home with only 2 bags. Her mouth was smiling, but it was made of something hard underneath. She set the bags down and kissed Evan's sleeping forehead and went to brush her teeth. While she sang a song about perfect skin through foam, I opened her tote to carry it to the bedroom, and my hand touched paper that felt both thick and cheap, the way fancy things do when they are built for speed. Receipts, a stack. I set them down on the table, and the top one grinned up at me with numbers that looked like a dare. Perfume, 3 bottles, subtotal $4,500. Dresses and accessories, multiple line items, subtotal $34,750. Then more. In a rounded hand, the cashier had written, "Card on hold, call issuer." Across that line, there was a highlighter stripe. Someone had underlined the word hold twice. In the margin was a smiley face, which felt like a joke the cashier told herself. The next receipt was for what she had been allowed to buy before the hold. The number $75,000 sat there like a big dog that would not get off your foot. I stood there and listened to the electric toothbrush click off and felt something inside me that I would not call rage because rage is loud. This was the opposite. This was gravity. This was the sound steel makes when you tighten a bolt to spec and you feel that precise little give that tells you the weight is coming onto the threads. Lena came out, saw the receipts, saw my face, and laughed in a way that would photograph well. "Do not be provincial," she said. "It is all returns if I decide. Promotions. Alyssa knows the reps. This is exposure." "Evan quoted you about my mum's card," I said. "Did he?" she said. "He is impressionable." "Where did the card come from?" She rolled her eyes. "Men do not understand brand," she said, and walked away with my mother's name in the air like a paper napkin that somebody forgot to throw out. I took a shower and stood under hot water until my skin stung, and when I came out, I saw the bag she takes to the gym slumped against the dresser. It was unzipped, casually, as if the world had never considered itself unkind. A second phone winked from the pocket. I do not snoop as a rule. I do observe. Observing is what keeps people alive on machines built to lift them 20 stories on cables that squeal when it rains. I picked up the second phone, watched it wake without a lock, and saw a thread labeled After Hours, and there he was. Ty. He had a gym body and ceramic teeth, and his laugh in photos looked like a yell. In the reflection of her sunglasses in one photo, I saw him taking the picture. I saw a black car door behind them with a handle that curved like a smile. Audi S5. He liked to park across 2 spaces, so his doors would not get dinged. I know that kind because I wait in line with them at the coffee place, and I can smell their detergent as if it costs triple. I put the phone down and felt that little steel give again. There was no shouting from me. I was beyond the part where shouting might help. The next morning I went to work and the ocean air slid under my jacket and reminded me I had nerves. The park at dawn is a different town. Seagulls walk like cops. The rides sit quiet and show you their bones. Nobody with a ticket gets to see what I see. That is a perk of labor. You know how things actually hold. I passed the maintenance bay, waved at Rafe in security, and headed for the Sky Whale because she squeaked at the high point last night, and I had told myself it was the wind, even though I knew it wasn't. I torqued bolts, checked seals, listened to bearings whisper their complaints, and let the work make me human. The whole time, my brain made a list, clean as a checklist on a clipboard. Evidence, but legal. Access, but legitimate. Revenge, but not in prison. By lunch, I had a plan that felt small and then felt exactly right, like a wrench that fits your hand better than the one that came in the kit. I took out a greasy notepad and wrote, public credibility, financial spine, personal pride. Then I underlined each and tucked the paper into my pocket the way someone else would tuck in a prayer. That afternoon, while the sun flared over the rusted rooftops and the gulls screamed their gossip, I drove to my mother's place. Her apartment sat above a nail salon that always smelled faintly of acetone and lilacs. Marge opened the door in her housecoat. hair pinned up with a pen, TV muttering in the background. Her eyes were the same sharp grey as mine, but hers had a tired kindness to them that I had long since misplaced. "You look like a man who hasn't slept," she said. "Mom," I asked, "did you give Lena any kind of card? Something with a balance on it? Something big?" She laughed, the kind of laugh that starts like disbelief and ends like memory. "Son, the only card I have with a balance is my grocery points card, and it's negative because I forgot to scan it last week. Why?" So I told her. Not everything. Some things are poison even in small doses, but enough. The store, the spending, the number. She sat down slow, like the air had gone thick. She used my name. "Looks like it." "That's identity theft," she said. "That's marriage," I said. She gave me a look that could have bent steel. Don't you dare defend her with clever words. If she's using me, she's using you worse. We sat there a while, the TV showing a cooking show where everything was plated neatly, no fingerprints, no burns. My mother reached over, her hand small and warm, and said, "You've always been the one who fixed things, but some things ain't meant to be fixed. Some things you take apart and throw away before they hurt you." I nodded, but inside I was already designing something. Not a fix, not quite. A correction. That night I came home to silence. Lena and Evan were gone, shopping maybe, or posting. The fridge light hit me like a confession booth's glow. I took out a beer, sat at the table and thought about the Sky Whale. The slow hum of her hydraulics, the pressure sensors, the maintenance logs. I thought about access cards, security cameras, passwords. I thought about how easily systems break when someone knows where the stress lives. When they came home, Lena had perfume on like armor, and Evan was sleepy in her arms. She set him on the couch and whispered something about content schedules and collabs. I just nodded. Words were useless currency between us now. The following week, her spending slowed. Not because she felt guilty, Lena didn't do guilt, but because she was strategizing. She started talking about followers, engagement, how real luxury was storytelling. She'd hold her phone up during dinner, filming the steam rising from reheated pasta, captioning it, "Family first, always." I'd watch the comments roll in later, hundreds of hearts, a few brands dropping emojis like bait. At work, I started saving copies of security logs, maintenance requests, entry records. Rafe owed me a favor, and he handed over a few key cards marked as test batch. The park ran on a skeleton crew in the off-season. Nobody checked twice when I worked late. One night, around midnight, I stood under the Sky Whale's belly, the air thick with salt. The ride was a miracle of rust and faith. Each pod hung from cables older than some marriages. I ran my hand along the control panel, felt the hum of stored power, the steady rhythm of machinery that didn't know right from wrong, only input from command. I wasn't planning to hurt her. That's not the kind of revenge I meant. I was planning to make her visible. Lena's power came from presentation, from the illusion of control. I'd learned long ago that nothing unravels faster than an illusion under light. So I began. First, I reached out to the park's PR team anonymously, sent them a few screenshots from her second phone. Brand partnerships, unpaid taxes, luxury goods purchased with sponsorship funds. Then, a few messages to one of her favorite influencers, Alyssa, the same one who knew the reps. I wrote as a concerned partner. I attached a photo or two, the kind that tells the truth without needing captions. The next step was smaller but sharper. The card she'd used. I called the issuing bank, gave them the evidence that it had been opened fraudulently under my mother's name. They froze the account within hours. Lena wouldn't find out until she tried to buy something else. When she did, I was home. She came through the door like a storm, shoes sharp against the tile. "What did you do?" she asked. "Fixed a leak," I said. "You called the bank?" "I called justice." She stared at me, eyes bright like polished glass. You think you're noble. You embarrassed me in front of people who matter. People who matter, I repeated. You mean the ones who only see what you show them? Exactly, she said. That's the world now. You wouldn't understand. Maybe not, I said, but the world still runs on the work of people who fix what others break. She didn't reply. She just stared at me, then turned and walked out again, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. Days passed. Online, her feed went quiet. Sponsors withdrew. The comments turned from hearts to questions, then to silence. Meanwhile, I kept working. The sky whale never judged. She only demanded precision. I gave her that, every bolt, every rotation. The crew noticed I'd grown quieter, steadier. Rafe said, "You look like a man who finally found the right wrench." Maybe I had. One evening, Evan sat beside me, sketching on his tablet. He was drawing the park, a lopsided version of the sky whale, its mouth smiling, waves beneath it. "Does she fly?" I asked. "In my game she does," he said. "She flies away from the ocean and doesn't come back until she's clean." "That's a good trick," I said. He looked at me seriously. "Dad, are you and Mom okay?" I hesitated. Kids know more than they should. "We're working on it," I said. "Like when you fix rides." "Sort of, but sometimes fixing means taking something apart to make sure it can't break again." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing. 2 weeks later, a courier delivered an envelope addressed to me in Lena's handwriting. Inside were two things: a single photo, her and Ty, laughing somewhere expensive, and a check for $200, made out to my mother. No note, no apology, just the check, like a receipt from a purchase she regretted halfway through. I gave it to Marge the next day. She looked at it, then at me. "You cashing this?" "No," I said. "You?" She folded it once, then again, and dropped it into her coffee mug. The paper darkened, the ink ran, and the numbers bled away. "Guess not," she said. Lena moved out that month. She took half the furniture, all the mirrors, and left behind one of the ring lights. Evan stayed with me 3 days a week, then 4. He stopped asking when she'd call. The apartment began to smell like work again, like metal and soap and air that didn't pretend. Sometimes at night, I walk the park when it's closed. The rides breathe in the dark, metal cooling, steel contracting. The sky whale sits above the sea like a patient creature waiting for dawn. I check her bolts, her cables, her spine. I listen. She never lies. I keep that greasy notepad in my locker. The list is still there. Public credibility, financial spine, personal pride. I've crossed out the first 2. The third remains. Because pride isn't loud. It doesn't shine or post or need followers. It's the quiet hum of a well-talked joint, the small click that tells you something will hold under weight. It's knowing that you didn't shout, didn't break, didn't beg. You just built. And maybe someday, when Evan's older, when he asks what happened, I'll tell him this: that his mother chased the world until it caught her back, and his father learned that silence can be stronger than spectacle. Until then, I'll keep the park running. The smell of salt, the hiss of hydraulics, the slow rise of the sky whale into morning light. The sea keeps eating, the machines keep singing, and the world keeps pretending it doesn't depend on men like me tightening bolts in the dark. But I know better. I always did. Before we go any further, hit the hype button, take a second to subscribe, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? After my shift, I ate a sandwich in the truck and watched gulls fight over a heel. The bread was stale, the turkey dry, but I chewed slow because there was nowhere else to be. The gulls had the same argument every day: white wings, grey backs, sharp cries that sounded like someone trying to laugh and cough at once. They fought in loops, swooping down for the crust and colliding mid-air. One of them always lost a feather, and another always limped away with nothing, yet they came back the next day as if the world might finally be fair. I admired them for that. I wiped my hands on a napkin and let the crumbs fall to the floor mat. The truck smelled like oil and sun-warmed plastic, and the radio, which hadn't worked in months, still glowed faintly when the ignition was on, as if it were pretending to remember sound. Then I drove to the county office and paid the kind of fee that buys you public records. It wasn't much, $48.25, but it felt like buying a key to a door no one wanted to open. County offices always have the same air. Too much disinfectant, not enough hope. A woman behind the counter had the patience of sedimentary rock. I told her what I needed, and she handed me a clipboard with forms that asked for the same information 3 times in slightly different ways. She pointed me toward the computer terminals lined against the wall, each with a sign taped above the screen. Do not insert foreign devices. The screens hummed and flickered like tired eyes. They are dull rooms, county offices. They keep the skeletons of businesses in drawers that squeak, the bones of failed ventures catalogued with the same precision as birth records and building permits. You can feel the ghosts of ambition there, the way dust feels heavy in late afternoon light. The chairs are bolted down as if someone once tried to escape with one. The carpet is the color of old oatmeal. The clerk coughed, and the sound echoed off the laminate. There it was, the listing for Vale and Ivy Boutique, owners Tyler Vale and Alyssa Pike. I'd heard of it, small storefront, curated racks, the kind of place that sold linen dresses and ceramic jewelry to people who said artisan with reverence. A UCC filing flagged fixtures and racks as collateral to a small local lender. UCCs are like little leashes that bankers put around stuff so they can yank later without calling it theft. It's a quiet violence written in fine print. I read the document number twice and wrote it down on a notepad I kept in my jacket. The pen's ink was fading, but the number came through legible enough. Back in my truck, I pulled up the lease PDF for the boutique space because the landlord had posted the building's information to attract buyers last year and forgotten to take it down. The site was still live, full of optimism and typos, promising high foot traffic and unparalleled visibility, both of which were lies, unless you counted the pigeons. Clause 14b, late rent triggers a 3-day pay or quit. A small clause with sharp teeth. I smiled, and the truck's windshield made the smile look better than it was. My reflection was a trick of light and fatigue, the kind that could pass for confidence if you didn't look long. At home, Lena posted a haul video where she explained how you can always return, except when you cannot. She said it with a smile that trembled around the edges. The algorithm loved her. The ring light framed her face in artificial grace, and in its reflection, I could see 2 wine glasses behind her on the counter. The caption said Self-Care Sunday. The comments were people I knew only as circles with letters, avatars of approval and envy. Alyssa left 3 hearts. Ty posted a fire emoji because subtlety is for cowards. I watched it twice, not for Lena, but for the background, for what the reflection might give away. The next day, I caught Rafe by the security booth and asked about blind spots. Rafe had worked at the park since before it was repainted and renamed twice. He wore his authority like his old denim jacket, faded, familiar, stubbornly intact. He squinted at me under the bill of his hat. "You planning to do something dumb?" he said, and it wasn't a question. "Something careful," I said. He looked at me for a long time, the kind of long that measures a man. "You need something from Cam's. You write to request. Park property only. No fishing. You know the rules." "I know," I said. "I mostly want to know where not to step." "That's a first," he said, but he told me anyway. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he wanted to see where I'd take the knowledge. There is a ladder behind the mirror hall that cameras can't see, because of a wind chime someone hung there years ago. It catches the sun like a disco ball in summer and makes the lens act drunk. The cameras don't understand light, just contrast, and the glint blinds them like truth. There is a catwalk over the midway that's only for maintenance, and we lock it, but locks are ideas more than items in a place like this. Keys go missing, rules evaporate. There is a dry dock under the Sky Whale that smells like wet pennies and mouldy dreams. If you duck there, you can stay unseen forever, or until you think you are. I spent the week paying attention. You cannot hurry steel, and patience is the only solvent that works on suspicion. I watched the way people moved when they thought no one was watching. The janitors cutting corners, the vendors pocketing change, the lovers using dark corners like punctuation marks. The park had its rhythms, music, chatter, hum of generators, and underneath it all, a quieter pulse, the kind that tells you something is off if you know how to listen. Lena left one night with a dress bag over her shoulder. She told me it was for a brand event at the park after hours. Her tone was breezy, but she never met my eyes. She had an employee fob on a lanyard, with her name spelled in gold cursive, because of course she did. It glinted when she moved, a tiny crown she didn't need but wore anyway. The next morning, Rafe showed me a still off a camera that pointed across the empty gondolas of the Sky Whale. There, under the glow of the overheads, stood Lena and Ty, and a low picnic with candles, which is against 10 separate rules, 5 written and 5 unwritten. They had propped a gondola door with a shoe. They had not buckled the harness. Rafe leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're the maintenance lead," he said. "Would you like to write a safety memo?" "I would like to print a picture," I said. He didn't say no. He never did when silence could serve as permission. The printer coughed out the images with a heat that smelled like dust and ozone. 2 frames, grainy but clear enough to damn. Lena's hair caught the light like a flame. Ty's grin was the kind that mistook carelessness for charm. When I left the office, I drove past the boutique. Through the glass, Ty petted a rack of dresses like he had birthed them. Alyssa counted a stack of cash with the hunger of someone who remembered what noodles for dinner meant. The landlord had taped a neutral letter in the lower corner of the window, the way they do when they want to pretend everything is normal. It said, "Notice" in a font that tries to be calm. People passing by didn't look twice. They never do. The world runs on polite blindness. That night, I set a plain envelope on our kitchen table where Lena would find it. The kitchen smelled faintly of wine and citrus cleaner. Inside, I put 2 Polaroids of the Sky Whale picnic. On one, I wrote in block letters, "At least buckle the harness, Ty." I did not sign it. The handwriting was deliberate, the kind that tries to disguise itself but ends up looking more honest for the effort. I went to bed and slept so well I scared myself. The next morning, the envelope was gone and the trash smelled like perfume. The air felt lighter, almost kind, like the world had exhaled for me. But peace never stays. It just circles, waiting for a place to land. For the next few days, I pretended to forget. I went through the motions, clocked in, checked bolts, signed work orders. Rafe nodded at me, with that unreadable look of someone who knows enough to stay silent. I noticed Lena's car wasn't home when I left for the night shift, and when I came back, it was there, parked slightly crooked like she'd returned in a hurry. The kitchen table was wiped clean. By Thursday, the boutique's window was half covered with brown paper. A handwritten sign read, "Temporarily closed for renovation." Behind the glass, I could still see the faint glow of a ring light and a pile of unsold shoes. The landlord's notice had multiplied. Now there were 2, one of them taped over the other. The newer letter, dated just 2 days apart. Layers of civility stacked like lies. I stopped by the county office again that Friday, under the pretense of needing more records. The same clerk sat behind the counter, chewing mint gum and scrolling through her phone. When I asked if there'd been any updates to the UCC filings, she looked at me over the rim of her glasses. People in trouble don't usually file updates, she said, then clicked through anyway. She was right, nothing new. But I noticed another name added to a different filing, a small transfer note tucked in the margin. It wasn't unusual, just convenient. Back outside, the sky looked bleached, like someone had turned the color down on the world. I drove to the pier for coffee and sat in the truck again. The gulls were there, fighting over another crust, as relentless as habit. The ocean smelled like aluminum and memory. I wondered how long it would take before Lena said something, before Ty noticed the missing calm in her eyes. Maybe she already had. Maybe that's why she'd stopped humming in the shower. That weekend, the park held a daytime promotion. Half-price wristbands, families spilling in like waves. I fixed a loose railing near the Sky Whale's entrance and caught my reflection in the chrome. A face weathered enough to look like it had stopped hoping but hadn't. The ride creaked and sighed overhead. I knew every bolt by heart, every cable that sang when wind hit it right. Safety isn't a condition, it's a performance. People trust the illusion because it's prettier than the truth. Lena came that afternoon, walking beside Alyssa. They laughed too loud, the way people do when they're trying to prove ease. Ty trailed behind, carrying a camera bag and a new kind of arrogance. He looked around, saw me, and his smile faltered. Just for a second, but it was enough. That night, Lena came home late again. She moved quietly, as if afraid of her own footsteps. I lay in bed pretending to sleep, the hum of the refrigerator marking time. She paused by the door, maybe watching me, maybe deciding something. Then she went into the bathroom and ran the tap long enough to cover the sound of a sob or a phone call. I didn't check which. Sunday morning, the boutique sign was gone. The paper still covered the window, but someone had written across it in marker, "Moving locations, stay tuned." The exclamation mark felt desperate. I stood across the street with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold and watched Ty load boxes into a van. Alyssa wasn't there. The landlord's car was. He stood by the curb, hands in pockets, looking at the door like he couldn't remember if it had once been worth more. Weeks pass in strange shapes when you stop expecting them to mean anything. Rafe retired early, said he'd go fishing, but everyone knew he'd just sit on his porch with a radio that only caught static. The Sky Whale was shut down for inspection after a complaint about unauthorized use. I knew who had filed it. I didn't ask what they found. Some things you don't want confirmed. Lena still posted, but less often. The comments thinned. The lighting wasn't as bright. Sometimes she filmed in the bedroom, facing the wall so you couldn't see the empty space on the dresser where the envelope had once sat. One night, she turned to me after dinner and asked, "Do you ever feel like you know how a story ends, but you have to keep living it anyway?" I said yes. She nodded, as if that were enough. Months later, I saw Ty again at a hardware store, buying locks. He looked thinner, the kind of thin that comes from dodging questions. He didn't see me, or pretended not to. I watched him load his cart with brass and steel, tiny symbols of control. People always think safety lives in objects. They forget it lives in behavior. The county office got new chairs that winter. The clerk retired. The drawers still squeaked. Vale and ivy dissolved quietly, absorbed by paperwork and dust. The UCC lien was satisfied. The lender paid off with proceeds from something. Maybe a sublease, maybe a sale. The record didn't say. It never does. Sometimes I drive by the old storefront. The glass is clean again, the paper gone. A new sign reads, "Bloom Room, Plants and Gifts." Inside, a young woman arranges succulents under a warm light, humming to herself. There are no notices on the window. No ghosts, at least not visible ones. Lena doesn't talk about the park anymore. She started a different kind of channel, interior design, quiet spaces, minimalism. I help with the lights sometimes. She smiles differently now, smaller but steadier. There's peace in her eyes, or something close enough to pretend. At night, when the house settles and the hum of the heater fills the dark, I think about that ladder behind Mirror Hall, the one hidden by the wind chime. I think about how every system has its blind spots, and every person learns where they are. I think about the sky whale, the way it lifted people for a few minutes just to remind them how far they could fall. Sometimes, on windless evenings, I dream of gulls fighting over a crust again. I wake with the taste of salt in my mouth and the faint smell of perfume still clinging to the air, and I wonder if anything was ever really thrown away, or if we all just learn to live among the things we've hidden. If you want to break a thing without touching it, you start with the angles. You learn the pressure points, the quiet seams where weight gathers and meaning hides. Most people think breaking is a matter of force, of noise, of some visible impact. But the truth is simpler and meaner. Everything that stands up does so at a price of balance. And if you shift that balance by a breath, gravity does the rest. The trick is knowing where to breathe. Ty's black Audi S5 was one of those balances. A camera on wheels in his own mind, a moving stage polished enough to reflect the shape of his ego. He believed content was a kind of prayer, something that could redeem him if enough people watched, if enough hearts clicked. Every gesture he made was half offering, half audition. He didn't move through the world. He framed it, polished it, filtered it, smoothed the pores of the day until it gleamed. He shot a slow-motion video of himself loading boxes into his trunk at a loading zone, the kind of cinematic domesticity that only exists when someone's watching. His lip was bitten, like he thought it meant tension, his jaw tight in the way people practice in mirrors. I watched from my truck and drank coffee I knew was too old, too bitter, the kind that leaves a film on your tongue but feels honest in your hand. I waited, because there is always a second act in a man like that, and it always arrives right when he thinks the applause is starting. He checked his teeth in the rearview mirror, made a small correction to the world's reflection, and then pulled into the lot by the boardwalk. He swung the car across 2 handicap spots, perfect center, a black streak cutting through blue paint and white lines. He left it there like a child with a toy who never learned how to put things away, how to return the world to the order he found it in. I got out, walked past like a bored citizen, neutral face, hands in my pockets. I filmed the plate, the paint, the posture of the man who thought the world was a mirror for his own light. I did not yell. I did not post. I simply sent the video to a small account run by a local barista named Daisy, who hated hypocrisy like it was her part-time job. Daisy understood performance. She made tulips out of milk foam, but she also made enemies out of influencers. I titled the file, "Influencer Parks Like a King for 5 Minutes of Pretending." Daisy posted. The caption was a bad pun about wheels and privilege, but the comments were better, angrier, sharper, written in the syntax of justice. Alyssa, Ty's partner, in both business and curated affection, DM'd Daisy and said how upset she was that anyone would question their values. She used the word authentic twice and added a heart emoji that trembled with defensive energy. Meanwhile, a guy in a wheelchair, who goes by Captain Salty, pointed out that he couldn't unload his van that evening because a shiny S5 had been blocking the curb ramp. He posted a picture of the car from his dashcam. It matched my video exactly. By dinner, Vale and Ivy, the boutique brand Ty and Alyssa had built out of mood boards and second-hand ethics, had more threats in their comments than compliments. It does not take much to tilt a scale when the scale is held up by vibes. When you trade an image, the first crack in your reflection is the start of your collapse. Lena arrived home bright and tight as pressboard, edges sealed, smile stapled in place. She set her phone face down, a small act that made a sound louder than a slap. I poured water because that was the ritual we still knew. Her glass, half full, my glass, half empty. She picked a fight the way cats pick at a corner of cardboard, not because they need to, but because the noise fills the silence. "You left something disgusting on the table," she said, her voice even, sharp as polished steel. "Disgusting how?" I said, already knowing she wasn't talking about crumbs or spills. "Do not play small town with me," she said. "Do not write notes." The note had been nothing, a line scrawled on a receipt, a thought I meant to throw away. But she had found it, and that was enough. I looked at her and said, "Then buckle the harness." She stared at me with a look that would have been hate if she thought I deserved that much energy. "I'm going to take the house," she said softly. "I'll take the only thing you think you built. My lawyer says it's sensible." "Try," I said, and smiled the way men do when they know the limits of steel. She left the room like a face closing, and the silence she left behind was heavy, like a door that doesn't latch. At work, the sky whale purred under my hands. That machine was a miracle of mechanics, gears whispering in oil, belts moving like breath. It was calming to tighten what can be tightened, to feel something respond predictably to torque. People are never like that. They resist in ways that don't make sense, bend where they shouldn't, snap when you least expect it. But metal listens. Metal remembers its shape. I met Daisy for a coffee like I was nothing, like we were just neighbors who wanted caffeine. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and ambition. She wore an oversized denim jacket and had her phone perched against a mug, filming foam art with reverence. While she filmed, I accidentally let slide a line about the boutique's claims of sustainability. I said they were using artisan tags from a supplier in Shenzhen. I said it casually, like gossip that tasted like truth. I knew this because, when I had carried in the fridge food that day, I had also carried in a box that the UPS man left at our door. The label was in Chinese. The contents were cloth tags that said, "hand-sewn with care" in a font you could buy by the pound. I watched her pupils dilate slightly, the look of someone who had just been handed a pellet of sugar. Daisy smiled the smile of a person who had found her next post. Her followers didn't just like her, they enlisted. Screens lit up with outrage. Comments filled with words like fraud, fake, parasite. Someone found the supplier's website and posted screenshots. Someone else shared a clip of Alyssa unboxing locally made scarves, time-stamped a week after the shipment. By the end of the week, the landlord had taped a 3-day pay or quit notice to the boutique's door. The paper fluttered like a pale flag in the wind. The little rectangles of paper make people mean. Alyssa looked pale when she saw it, a ghost framed by fairy lights in the display window. Ty looked mad in that quiet way, jaw locked, eyes bright with the knowledge that anger could still make him feel alive. Lena filmed a video that said, "Stress is a mindset," and used a filter that made her eyelashes look like rakes. The caption was something about resilience, about turning challenges into content. The likes came slower this time. People can smell desperation even through the screen. I sat at our table that night, cleaned the grit from under my nails with a toothpick, and thought about phase 2. The money. Where it came from. Where it went. How to make it matter. Phase 2 required patience. People think revenge is an explosion, but it's really an erosion. Slow, deliberate, inevitable. Ty and Alyssa had built Veil and Ivy on illusions, but illusions cost money. Sponsorships, influencer events, faux donations to local causes that somehow came back as consulting fees. I had seen the invoices. I had watched the patterns. There was a rhythm to their spending, a pulse that told me exactly how they breathed. Every Sunday, they met with a man named Carson at a wine bar that pretended to be a co-working space. He was the accountant, though he looked more like a lifestyle coach. White sneakers, gold watch, an air of easy confidence. He handled their filings, their brand partnerships, their shell companies. I started watching Carson. You can learn a lot about a man by how he tips. You can learn more by how he doesn't. I followed the paper trail through public records, late nights with the glow of the screen painting the walls. The boutique's account was tied to another LLC, one registered to a P.O. box 2 towns over. The box was rented by a woman named Marjorie Crane, 72, widowed, who had no idea her name was on anything. I called her pretending to be from the bank. She said she hadn't opened an account in years, that she didn't even use online banking. When I thanked her and hung up, I knew the angle had appeared. All it would take was light, one clean exposure. Daisy didn't need to be told twice. I sent her a screenshot of the registration and let her imagination do the rest. She posted a story with a question box. Should sustainable brands use stolen identities for their shell companies? Asking for a boutique in the Pier District. The answers poured in. Screenshots circulated. By morning, local news had picked it up. By evening, the landlord's notice had turned into eviction papers. Lena saw the headlines on her phone and went very still. She didn't speak to me for 2 days, and when she finally did, her voice was glass. "You enjoy this," she said. "You think destruction is art." I didn't answer. I thought about Ty's perfect hair, Alyssa's perfect captions, the way they smiled into lenses like gods pretending to be human. I thought about the way power shifts when people start whispering instead of clapping. Maybe destruction isn't art. Maybe it's gravity. Maybe I just know how to tilt the scale. The boutique closed within a month. The last post on their feed was a black square with a caption about transformation. Comments were turned off. Daisy moved on to a new scandal. The street looked cleaner, without their window lights. At night, the reflection of the boardwalk stretched out across the glass, unbroken, calm. But I kept thinking about the angles, about Lena's threat, about the house, about what was left to lose. You can destroy a reputation in a week, but a marriage dies in whispers. I heard them in the kitchen, in the hallway, in the pauses between sentences. I wondered if I had aimed the destruction outward when it had been turning inward all along. Sometimes I replay the footage, Ty's car, the blue lines, the moment he looks at his reflection in the rear view. I pause it just before he smiles. There's something in that frame, something I recognize, the certainty that the world exists to mirror you until it doesn't. That's the moment when balance tips. That's the breath that breaks it. And still, I think about phase 3. Not revenge anymore. Something else. A reordering. A way to make meaning from the wreckage, to prove that when you take apart a structure, you can learn its truths. I tighten what can be tightened, adjust what can be adjusted. Somewhere, another machine hums, waiting for its turn. Tax lion certificates are quiet. They are not sexy. They are the kind of papers men like Ty never think about because they believe the world is a wedding and a miracle is a rite. When a building falls behind on taxes, the county sells a certificate. It is not ownership. It is a right to be paid back with interest or to move toward foreclosing on the title if nobody redeems. Where I live, they are cheap if you are patient and boring. Marge has a modest trust that is more wish than money. She uses it to keep her house painted and the gutters clean. She lets me manage the boring parts. I bought the tax lien certificate on the building that housed Vale and Ivy. The landlord had not redeemed last time anyone checked. I called him, and he admitted his finances were a pile of rainy days. I offered to front the unpaid utility bills in exchange for a right of first refusal if the boutique defaulted and tried to assign the lease. He liked the phrase right of first refusal because it made him feel like he would still be a captain of his own ship. We signed papers on his chipped counter. He rifled in a drawer for a pen like a squirrel in leaves. I initialed slowly. I do everything slow when it matters because that way my heart can catch up. The best leverage is not a bat. It is an obligation with a polite letterhead. Lena posted a story in a store bathroom mirror that night. 2 wine glasses, one reflection. Her caption said, "Solo prep." Somewhere a child coughed. Alyssa reposted with sparkles. Ty did a push-up video where he did not go all the way down. I told myself not to corner him too early. If you make a man like that feel hunted before the groundwork is poured, he runs loud and kicks up dust, and sometimes the wrong people choke. Then the card came back like a ghost. A message from a fintech company popped into our home email account. It was one of those cheerful dashboards that turn debt into confetti. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. The $130,000 was not a credit card limit. It was a business expense preload program with a cap, attached to Vale and Ivy through Ty. No hard credit check because they wanted sign-ups. They offered slick language about runway and scale. The email was addressed to Ty. It CC'd Lena. It mentioned verification. There was a line about KYC failing because of a mismatch in an SSN. The hold at the register flashed back into my head like a red light. Lena had not used my mother's card because such a card did not exist. She had used a business facility Ty had told her was investor money, and now the system had hiccuped. The smiley face on the receipt looked different in retrospect. If I had turned the paper over, I might have found a phone number and a note in pencil that said, "This again." I read the email chain 3 times and leaned back and saw it all like a drawing on tracing paper. Ty had dressed up debt as backing because that is a thing of his. Lena believed because believing is an outfit too. I thought about leaving it there, a story that turned to mold under the sink. But then I remembered the fridge and the way she said peasants, and something in me wanted to push, so I did. I asked Ray for a brief chat in the mirror hall after closing. The hall was off, which meant the mirrors were not doing their usual tricks, which meant the place felt like an empty mall. I stood there surrounded by 20 Nates, all tired, all ready. I heard Ty's shoes before I saw him. He wears soles that announce price. He walked in and pretended to be careless. "You," he said, like the word was a fly. "Me," I said. "This is harassment," he said. "This is a conversation," I said. He moved like he might put a finger in my face. He is the kind of man who has never worked a day he could not also photograph. When he moved again, I slapped him. Not hard enough to break anything, hard enough to wring the mirror air. It was the sound of a palm against a cheek and the feel of a choice being made. If you ever step onto my rides after hours again, if you ever use her fob for a picnic under a harness, I talk to keep strangers alive, I will tell the city you are reckless. Not the police, the permitting office. They hate theatre. I will call your landlord on the number he uses for his son, because that is the one he picks up. I will talk to Daisy about what people say about your inventory. I will do all of that without raising my voice. "You hit me," he said, scandalized, touching his cheek like a child. "I warned you," I said, and leaned on the line I had been saving. "And put your spare key somewhere other than under the 3rd paving stone by the blue succulent Ty. People who watch your lives know you have a blue succulent. Your gate code is 4 digits you post every time you tag your building. Do you know how easy it is to zoom in on a keypad camera reflection? Lock your life like you lock your mouth." He went white in a good way. The mirror to my left showed me looking like a man who had made peace with something. He left at speed, shoulders square, like he thought the performance might protect him from gravity. A week later, I called the towing company that has the contract with the boutique's building. I was polite. It pays to be. I told them an Audi had been parked in the fire lane for 30 minutes while boxes were unloaded, and somebody mentioned they'd called 3 times. The dispatcher sighed the sigh of a person who does not get paid enough to hear the same sin daily. 10 minutes later, Ty's car was on a hook and rolling. Ty came out with his arms wide, which is a joke gesture where the punchline is always quoted. The building's manager pointed at the sign with the red letters. Ty argued. The manager, a man named Arthur who looks like a jacket on a hanger, shrugged and handed him a card with a lot number. The fee had a 0 at the end. Ty posted a rant. The comments were unkind. I drank coffee and watched the wind flex the flags. That night, I made a small purchase online. Pressurized skunk oil, the kind hikers buy to convince bears that backpacks are not snacks. Legal, not advisable. It arrived in a box that promised meditation. I unscrewed the cabin filter intake panel on the Audi where it sleeps at the public garage. The one camera that covers that corner pointed backward because some kid hit it with a basketball. I spritzed the intake once, twice, closed the panel, and walked away with my heart beating fast and high, like a ride cresting. By the next morning, the car smelled like a story nobody wants to tell. Ty made a video in which he said haters had vandalized his property. People joked that the car now finally had personality. He drove it with the windows down and the look of a man who has discovered he is human. Lena and Alyssa were not at the boutique when I went by to look at the rent notice. Inside, a light hummed. In the back room, something revealed itself because I opened a door I was allowed to as a prospective tenant should the space open. A stack of towels stained tan from spray tan lay like fallen flags. On a shelf sat a bag with a tag that still squeaked when I moved it, the brand name screaming that it had never been theirs. People who preach authenticity have closets too. Alyssa sent me a message from a burner account and asked to meet at a coffee shop that used to be a laundromat. She wore stress badly and looked at the door every 6 seconds. I can walk away from Vale and Ivy, she said without preamble. He wants to sell me on a pivot. He is lying to me. I know it. I cannot carry this. He owes me, but he will never pay unless someone else hurts. Why are you telling me? I said. Because you are hurting him, she said. Because you look like a man who keeps receipts. We all keep something, I said. She slid across a folder of inventory records that showed units received and units sold and units magically appearing in videos and then never appearing in the system. She did not say fraud. I did not either. I said, thank you, and she said, I did not do this for you. And we both pretended to believe ourselves. That weekend, the fintech company froze the preload program. The boutique's POS terminal chirped and displayed that error message people fear, like the end times. Customers posted pictures of their shopping bags, and the captions said awkward things. Lena stood in the doorway and told people to keep calm. Ty told everyone to leave if they were not supportive. Alyssa wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at me across the street like I had turned into weather. For my mother's birthday, I invited a few neighbors to the park's closed arcade, and Rafe arranged for us to plug in just enough games to make noise. Marge likes the frog game, where you whack moles and wax frogs instead for reasons that are hers. We sang. I posted a picture of her cutting a cake and wrote, "Some people show up." I did not tag anyone. The comments did the job for me. The gossip that had been circling like seagulls finally found something shiny. If you set a trap, you should know the trap you are actually setting. The card was the lever, but I had not understood the fulcrum until the audit trail arrived in our inbox, like a dog that has come home with someone else's shoe. The fintech company had sent a reauthorization to cure their KYC. It included a link to the e-sign platform and a note that the cosigner would need to confirm identity. The e-sign log was attached as a courtesy to show the attempt history. On a boring little PDF were a series of entries with timestamps and IP addresses and the device notes. Lena had signed digitally 3 months ago from our couch on the laptop she uses to edit her videos, same IP as the one I pay for and can prove is ours. She had clicked a box that said she was a cosigner. There was a screenshot of her name. There was a line that said captured by webcam, face match acceptable. The webcam grab was washed out and unflattering and hers. Ty had not lied exactly. He had told the truth in a shape that hid its edges. Lena had not read. She had clicked. Now she was tied to a program that smelled like cologne and looked like a cliff. I printed the audit trail and sat at the table. I poured water and waited for her to come home. When she did, I pushed the papers across the wood like a dealer. She looked down, and her mouth turned into a small, neat line. "What is this?" she said. "It is the agreement you signed for Ty's card," I said. "The one with $130,000. You told Evan it was from my mother. It was from you." She stared at the page like a person who has never learned to read. Then her eyes flicked to the webcam capture. Her hand hovered over the image like she might make it go away by dragging it off the table. "Everyone does this," she said. "It is how business works." "It is how debt works," I said. "The landlord posted pay or quit. The program is frozen. You signed. You shoulder this with him now." She breathed through her nose. "Here is what I want," I said quietly. "You renounce claims on the house. You sign a post-nup separation of assets, and you stop calling it your investment when my hours paid for these walls. You do not talk to my mother again, unless she calls you. If you do these things, I do not send this audit packet to Alyssa and the landlord, who will then hold you responsible with Ty and stop believing you are a boat he can float on. I am not threatening to call police. I am promising to tell the truth to people who do not forgive easily." "You would not," she said. "Watch me," I said. She laughed, but it was a small sound. "You will look small," she said. "Men who do this look small." "I fix rides, Lena," I said. "I look however I look, and then the ride holds. Small is fine if it works." She left the table, came back with a glass of wine, did not drink it, and said she wanted to speak to a lawyer. I said good. She called her lawyer friend who likes to talk loud in steakhouses, and he told her she had exposure. I know this because she put the call on speaker to scare me, and it scared her. She hung up quiet as the first snow and went upstairs. 2 days later, Ty tried to grab a bag from me in the ferry dock lot. It was a bag that contained copies of some papers for the attorney I wanted to meet to formalize the post-nup. He was wearing a hoodie, like he was auditioning for Hurt. "You cannot do this," he said, reaching. I backed away, and he lunged, and his hand hit the bag, and it popped open. The wind blew the top page down the dock. He chased it, and his shoes slid on the wet boards because a storm had kicked up overnight, and the ferry wash had soaked everything. He grabbed the page, and his ankle twisted, and he stumbled into a stack of bait buckets and tangled line, like a man wrestling with seaweed. Officer Ortega, who patrols the dock like fate, stepped out from behind a post with a bored expression because she has seen more brawls over less. "Hands where I can see them," she said. "Which one of you geniuses thought running on wet decking was a good choice?" "He stole my documents," Ty said, trying to stand. "Those are mine," I said. Ortega looked at me with a face that said she recognized me from the time I reported a kid vomiting on the tilt-a-whirl. She looked at Ty with a face that said she recognized him from the video of the handicap spots. "I do not care whose god papers they are," she said. "You sit. You. Breathe. If I come back for either of you this week, I will write up everyone for something I can prove and let the judge sort it out. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. "Yes," Ty said. We all stood there in the wind, breathing the smell of bait and gasoline, and I realized my heart was beating, but it was not fast. It was steady as a drum when the band is marching. The lean clock ticked down like it belonged to me. The landlord could not redeem. He wanted to talk. We met in his office that used to be a dentist's waiting room. He wore a sweater with pills on it and offered me water that tasted like plastic. We signed the right of first refusal we had discussed, but now it was an assignment deal. If Vale and Ivy defaulted, he would assign the lease to my little holding company for $1 and my agreement to cover back utilities. I had that money because I had done the boring thing for 10 years. I saved cash in envelopes and never bought what the guys on the crew buy when they think there is no tomorrow. At the boutique, the POS froze for good, and the comments on their page turned into a long, low moan. Then, the default letter posted. Then the doors stayed locked for a day. Then I got the call. 2 days later, the landlord slid papers across the table and smiled in the way of men who have given up on better smiles. I walked out the legal tenant of an empty space that smelled like vanilla and denial. Per the lease, we were permitted a commercial reasonable liquidation of tenant goods left behind. We posted a notice that said, if you had prepaid goods with receipts, come claim them. People came with folded paper and hope. Some left with dresses, some left with nothing. A woman cried. Another woman yelled that she had paid for a special order that had never existed outside a caption. We logged everything with a clipboard because clipboards make people behave. Alyssa filmed a video outside where she said she had believed. She did not apologize exactly. She did not need to. The comments did the arithmetic for her. I called Lena and told her the liquidation was scheduled. She was quiet. I told her the post-nut package was ready in the attorney's office. Neutral public narrative for her. Clean house for me. She said, "You are cruel." And I said, "I am careful." She came to the office like a ghost going to confession and signed her name in blue ink where the tabs said "Sign here." The attorney explained that no epilogue was being written by law, just a distribution of facts. She nodded and left without hugging the room with her perfume like she usually does. The day of the liquidation, I stood in the doorway and watched Rafe set up caution tape where people always trip. People lined up. They talked like a small town talks. Quiet when you are near, loud when you step away. There was a box of unsold perfume. The labels peeled when your thumb got warm. A man in a shirt with a boat embroidered on the pocket asked if the mirrors were for sale. Ty did not show. He had gone quiet online, except for one story where he claimed the town had always been against him because he had taste. The park had a fireworks test scheduled for the end of the season. Permits, safety, all of it above board. We store the racks in a steel cage near the back lot, and the rule is, nobody steps into that space without a clipboard and 2 signatures that say yes. I had both. The night of the test, the wind died early, and the air sat dense and sultry like a towel left in a car. People gather on the boardwalk for tests, even when they do not know they are tests, because humans are drawn by the rumor of light. The catwalk over the midway is for maintenance. We have it locked, which means we believe in symbols. The symbol failed that night. Ty climbed up with a banner rolled under his arm, one of those snappy vinyls he uses for pop-up events. He had stayed away for days, and then this. The banner said, "Nate lies," and each letter looked like a blocky bruise. He intended to hang it so it would unfurl right as the first rack fired. Film it, post it, think the world turns on cues. I saw him from the ground and felt something that was not rage, not even pride. It was a kind of satisfaction so clean I almost laughed. I jogged the maintenance stairs and the metal rang under my boots. Rafe saw me and followed. He radioed Ortega because that is his job and he is good at it. By the time I reached the catwalk, Ty was halfway across and rolling the banner under the crossbar. He wore soft shoes that did not grip. "Get down," I said. He looked up with that grade school face he wears when he believes he is the teacher's favorite and has been surprised to learn there is a new teacher. "Stay back," he said. "I am making a statement." "You are making a hazard," I said. He kicked a bucket I had placed there earlier, a plain bucket of bolts for the crew to retrieve after the test, and it skittered, tipped, hit the catwalk rail, and tumbled. Below us, a glass canopy over a cotton candy stand caught the bucket and cracked like ice. Shouts. A kid screamed. No one was under it. Our tape line was good. Still, it sounded like guilt. "Idiot," I said. "Bullying," he said, and swung the banner pole at me. It whistled past my face and bit the catwalk rail with a ring. The banner slipped and wrapped around his leg like it wanted to be helpful and wasn't. I reached out and grabbed the pole and wrenched. It came free, and I tossed it to the grate and stepped on it. He swung with his fist and connected with my shoulder. The impact made a tidy, disappointing noise. I grabbed the front of his hoodie and walked him backward until his heels hit the low knee rail that keeps maintenance guys from doing what every park owner fears. "Do you smell that?" I said, breath close enough that he had to listen. "It is not fireworks, it is panic." "Let go," he said, trying to pull away, except the hoodie had done what hoodies do when caught, and now he was my fish. I leaned him over the rail enough that the world showed up how it does in dreams, when you cannot tell if falling would be relief. I wanted him small. I shoved him hard in the chest with my open palm, and he pinwheeled in a graceless arc and dropped onto the safety net that slung under the maintenance span. It boinged with a comic little noise, and the crowd below gasped like a choir told when to breathe. He lay there, staring at the sky, like a man who had just found out it was true. Rafe arrived at my side with Ortega 2 beats later. The alarm lights from security washed the catwalk in primary color. Ortega looked at me, looked at Ty in the net, and sighed. "Write your reports," she said. "Nobody move until I say so." On the midway, the crew assigned to the boutique space had started to work, their timing perfectly bad and perfectly right. They loosened the veil and ivy letters from the facade with battery drivers that whined like dentist drills. The letters came off in a way that makes sense when you see it. They were not carved, they were stuck, each one peeled and popped and got handed down a ladder to a man who put them in a box with the same care you use when you pick up a thing you loved and do not love anymore. I saw Lena in the crowd holding a box of unsold perfume, her face a calm plate, the light on her skin the color of the last second before a storm. I looked down at Ty flailing in the net, one sock at an angle, hair flattened, the banner wrapped around his shin like a pet that wanted to be held. He shouted something that was all vowels. I leaned on the rail as the first test mortar went up with a whoop and paused in the dark for a beat that felt like a held note. Every head tilted, the white blossom cracked open, the light laid the world bare like honesty. I felt the metal under my hands, the very metal I had tightened, and I let the line I had been carrying all week finally walk out of my mouth. "That net," I said, and my voice carried, because the catwalk and the quiet and the fireworks were doing me favors. "I built it." Ty heard me. The crowd heard me. Lena did too. The second rack went off with a fan of sparks that looked like a handful of thrown coins hitting a tile floor. Rafe smiled with his eyes. Ortega smirked like a woman who had seen dumber men take harder falls. The letters came down, V, then A, then L, one by one, until only the ivy painted on the brick remained, which looked more honest to me because paint is plain. I lifted my hands from the rail. The night tasted medicinal, as if the air had learned something about itself it did not want to know. I could have said something like, "I warned you." I could have said a movie line. But the easy line had already landed. People below started to clap in that unsure way. Towns clap when they are not applauding performance so much as the relief that somebody finally ended a thing that had been going on too long. Lena watched me for a full 3 seconds, lips pressed, then turned and set the box down on the curb, as if it was heavy, and walked away into nothing I could see. I stood there holding all the quiet I had asked for, and all the noise I had earned. Somewhere behind me, the fireworks supervisor shouted, "Clear!" and the last launch rose straight and white into the Monday night, hung, and burst in a final silver ripple that sounded exactly like a zipper closing.